It started innocently enough. I had just returned home after a long, exhausting day at work. The kind where everything feels heavy, and all you want is to collapse into your bed and forget the world. I tossed my jacket on the couch, kicked off my shoes, and headed to the bedroom to relax. It had been a strange week already. Nothing particularly exciting, but a subtle, underlying unease had started to settle over me. Nothing I could put my finger on, just that nagging feeling that something was off. But in my tired state, I was too worn out to care. I sank into my bed, the cool sheets offering immediate comfort, and I reached over to grab my blanket. It wasn't a particularly special blanket, just an old, soft one that had been with me for years. It had become a source of comfort. Its familiarity, a small but reliable solace in my otherwise chaotic life. As I pulled it over me, I noticed something strange. The blanket felt different, heavier, perhaps. There was a weight to it that I hadn't felt before. At first, I thought it was just the exhaustion, that maybe I was imagining it, but then I heard it, a sound, muffled, like a faint, pitiful whimper. I froze. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It sounded almost like someone crying, but there was no one else in my apartment. I was alone. The sound came again, a little louder this time, a low, sorrowful sound that sent a chill through my spine. I threw the blanket off me, my heart pounding in my chest. What the hell was that? I looked around the room, my eyes darting in every direction, but there was nothing there. Just the usual furniture, my clothes strewn about the room, but nothing unusual, except for the blanket. I slowly approached the corner of the room where I had dropped it. I didn't know why. I didn't know what was pulling me to that corner, but I had to see. I had to know. I bent down and picked up the blanket, feeling the weight of it in my hands. It was heavier than before, like something was trapped inside it. Then it happened again. The sound. A soft, guttural sob. The blanket was crying. The realization hit me like a brick wall, and my blood ran cold. I dropped it immediately, my legs nearly giving way beneath me. I backed away, my breath coming in short gasps, but I couldn't take my eyes off of it. I couldn't understand what was happening. How was this even possible? How could a blanket cry? My mind was racing, trying to come up with some kind of explanation, but nothing made sense. I was sure I was just overtired, maybe hallucinating from stress. But then, there was the undeniable sound, that pitiful sob. It wasn't in my head. It was real. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to leave the room. I needed space. I needed air. But as I stepped toward the door, the crying came again. Louder now, more desperate. It was coming from the blanket, but it wasn't just a sound anymore. It was like the entire room had shifted, like the very walls were closing in. I turned back, my gaze locking on the blanket in the corner. It was no longer still. It was moving, shifting in unnatural ways. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't anything normal. It was alive. The blanket writhed, the fabric twisting and contorting as though something was struggling inside it, trying to break free. My body froze in place, terror spreading through me like wildfire. The crying grew louder, the sobs now tinged with something else, fear, pain. I could feel it. I could feel whatever was trapped inside the blanket, trapped in that fabric, desperately trying to get out. Please, please. The sound whimpered. It was unmistakable. It wasn't just crying. It was begging for something, for release, for help. I couldn't breathe. The air felt thick, suffocating. I wanted to run, to leave, to get as far away from that cursed blanket as possible. But my feet wouldn't move. My body was paralyzed with fear. I watched, unable to tear my eyes away, as the blanket began to move again. Slowly, painfully, it unrolled itself, revealing something inside, something wrong. I couldn't see it clearly at first, but I knew. I knew deep down that whatever was inside that blanket was something I shouldn't be seeing, something that shouldn't exist. It was alive, I realized. It was breathing. It wasn't a person. It wasn't a creature. It was something else. Something inhuman. And it was crying. The sobs filled the room, echoing off the walls, drowning out all other sounds. "Help me," the voice whispered again, and I could feel the desperation in every word. But I couldn't help. I couldn't move. I could barely breathe. My heart was racing, pounding in my chest, and the only thing I could do was stare. Stare at the thing inside the blanket, the thing that shouldn't have been there, the thing that was crying and begging, struggling to break free, the thing that I had invited into my home without even knowing it. But now, it was too late. It was here, and I was trapped with it. I couldn't move. My legs felt like lead, my body completely frozen. As I stared at the writhing mass in the corner of my room, the blanket had unrolled itself completely now, and there, curled up in the folds of fabric, was something I couldn't even begin to comprehend. It wasn't a human, not an animal, but something else entirely. It was a grotesque shape, with no clear definition, just a wriggling mass of something unholy, something that had no business existing in this world. I could hear the sobs, hear the soft, agonizing cries that were no longer muffled, but echoed in the room, bouncing off the walls and wrapping themselves around my mind. "Help me!" The voice was strained, barely more than a whisper, but it was clear enough that every word hit me like a punch in the chest. My mind was screaming for me to move, to run, to leave this nightmare behind. But I couldn't. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the thing. It was calling to me, pulling me in with its pleading voice, its desperate cries. The blanket's edges quivered as if it were alive, and the creature inside, if it could even be called that, shifted, wriggling in a way that made my skin crawl. I tried to take a step back, but my feet remained planted. I could feel my pulse quicken, each beat a heavy thud in my ears, my thoughts racing, trying to piece together some kind of explanation, some kind of sense in all of this. But there was nothing. There was no explanation. This shouldn't be happening. It couldn't be happening. "You have to help me?" The voice was louder now, not just a whisper, but a faint scream that vibrated in the air. "I've been waiting so long." I wanted to scream, to demand what was happening, but no words came out. My throat was dry, constricted, as if the very air around me had thickened, making it impossible to breathe. My heart raced faster, and I took another step back, still unable to tear my eyes from the creature. I was trapped in a room with something that should not exist, something that was slowly crawling toward me, one twitching, jerking movement at a time. But just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the sobbing ceased. A dead silence fell over the room, and the air felt even thicker, heavier. I froze again, trying to listen for something, anything, but there was nothing. Only stillness. The room felt colder, the temperature dropping in an instant. I could see my breath, fogging up in the air, as the blanket stopped moving. It sat there, unmoving, like it was waiting for something, waiting for me. I stared at it, my mind racing to comprehend what had happened. It was like the thing inside had been temporarily stunned, frozen in place. Or was it watching me, waiting for me to make a move? I wanted to turn and run, but I couldn't. I couldn't look away. Every part of me was screaming to get out of that room, to leave the apartment, but I couldn't tear myself away from the blanket. It had me in its grip, in its thrall. And as the seconds passed in this unbearable silence, I could feel something else. A presence. Not from the blanket, not from the thing inside it, but something else. Something watching me. I turned my head, scanning the room, but there was nothing. Just the empty, still air of my bedroom. Yet, I felt it. I felt the eyes on me. I felt as if I were being watched from every corner, every crevice, even from within my own mind. "You shouldn't have opened it," a voice whispered from behind me, colder than the last. I turned quickly, but no one was there. The room was as empty as before, but I wasn't alone. The presence in the room was unmistakable. It was in the walls, in the space between my breaths. It was everywhere, just like the blanket, just like the sobbing, now gone silent. And in that moment, I understood. This was not over. This thing, whatever it was, had a purpose. It wasn't here by accident. It wasn't something that had just happened to wander into my life. It had been waiting for me to notice it, waiting for me to open the door. And I realized that the creature inside the blanket wasn't the only thing trapped. I was trapped too. In my own apartment, in my own home. I was just as much a prisoner as the thing that had been crying in the corner. I didn't know how, but somehow I knew this wasn't just a coincidence. There was something larger, something darker at play, and I had unwittingly become part of it. The silence hung in the air like a thick fog, pressing down on me, suffocating every thought. I stood there, frozen, staring at the blanket in the corner. The creature inside had gone still, its cries silenced, but I could feel it watching me. I could feel the weight of its presence, the way it seeped into every corner of the room, filling it with something I couldn't name. Fear? Dread? No, it was something far worse. It was as if the blanket, that seemingly innocent object, had become a window into something much darker. I couldn't explain it, couldn't make sense of it, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone. The creature inside that blanket wasn't alone either. It was as if it had a voice, a presence, that echoed in my mind, infecting my thoughts. "You can't run from this," the voice whispered, its words slithering through my consciousness like a serpent. "You opened the door. Now, you can never close it again." I wanted to scream, wanted to tear myself away from it, but my body wouldn't obey. It felt like I was bound to the room, bound to the blanket, and whatever it was that had taken hold of me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. It was as if the room itself was closing in around me. The temperature dropped even further, and I could see my breath hanging in the air. I turned my back on the blanket, hoping, praying, that if I walked away, it would all stop. But I knew it wouldn't. It was too late. I could feel the presence moving with me, pressing down on me, as if it were crawling beneath my skin. I glanced back at the corner. The blanket hadn't moved, but the air around it seemed charged, electric, as if something was about to happen. I could hear the whispers now, softer, more insistent, curling around me like a chain, pulling me back toward the corner. "You can't escape me," it said, the voice in my head clearer now, no longer a whisper, but a command. "You opened the door. You invited me in." I took a step back, my heart racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something was about to happen. The blanket in the corner seemed to pulse, like it was alive, like it was breathing. I knew I shouldn't approach it, but my feet were moving before I could stop them. Against my better judgment, I walked closer. The room seemed to darken as I neared the blanket, the shadows growing deeper, more suffocating. The whispers grew louder, faster, until they were all I could hear, all I could feel. "It's too late to turn back," the voice said. "You can't stop what's coming." And then, just as I reached out to touch it again, the blanket moved. It wasn't just shifting or swaying, it was alive. The fabric twisted, contorted, as if something were struggling to break free. I recoiled, stumbling backward, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. The blanket slowly unfurled, revealing what had been trapped inside. And what I saw, what I felt, was beyond anything I could have ever imagined. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything I could describe. It was a mass of dark, swirling energy, tendrils of shadow, reaching out like fingers. And its eyes were the worst part, hollow, empty, dark. It wasn't looking at me. It was looking through me as if it could see into my soul. "Help me," it whispered again, but the voice was different now. It wasn't the same begging, pitiful cry. It was cold, dead. "You freed me," it said, its voice a low rasp. "Now, you must pay the price." I could feel the temperature drop even more, the chill seeping into my bones, freezing me in place. The creature inside the blanket stretched, its form shifting and writhing, its tendrils reaching out, crawling across the floor, toward me. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I was trapped in that room, trapped in the presence of something that should never have existed. The creature had been waiting for me to open the door, waiting for me to let it in, and now it was free, and I was its prisoner. "You opened the door," the creature whispered, its voice so close I could feel it in my mind. "Now, you belong to me." The last thing I saw before everything went dark was its eyes. Those empty, hollow eyes staring at me with a hunger I could never understand. And then, everything went black. When I came to, the room was different. The apartment felt wrong, like it had been twisted somehow, warped beyond recognition. The air was thick, heavy with a presence that weighed down on me, crushing me. I tried to move, but my limbs felt like they were made of lead. I couldn't escape the sensation that I wasn't alone, that something was with me, watching me from the darkness. The room was still, too still. I was lying on the floor, my face pressed against the cold wood, and I could feel the chill creeping into my skin. I forced myself to sit up, my head spinning, disoriented. But I didn't need to look around to know what had happened. The blanket, the creature, it was still here. It had never left. My body trembled, my heart thudding in my chest. The whispers returned, softer now, like a constant hum in the background. But they were there. They were always there. "You can't escape," the voice murmured. "You'll never be free." The words were dripping with malice, but they weren't just words. They were more than that. They were a part of me, echoing in my thoughts, infiltrating my mind. I pushed myself up, my hands shaking as I clutched the edge of the couch for support. I couldn't stay in this room. I had to get out. I had to leave. But as I turned, something stopped me. The curtain, the blanket. It was hanging from the window again, perfectly still, like nothing had ever happened. But I could feel it. I could feel its presence, its power, radiating from the fabric. I could hear it breathing. "I'm always here," it whispered, as if it knew exactly what I was thinking. "You can't run from me." I took a step back, my mind racing. I had to leave. I had to get out. But I couldn't make my feet move. It was like I was trapped in place, caught in a web of fear and confusion. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The room felt colder, the shadows growing deeper, thicker. I tried to focus, tried to force myself to leave, but the presence had consumed me. It was everywhere, in the walls, in the very air I breathed. I couldn't escape. I couldn't escape from the thing inside the blanket, the thing that was now a part of me. "You're mine," it said again, its voice slipping into my thoughts like an intrusive whisper. "You'll never be free of me. I'll always be here." I closed my eyes, trying to block it out, but the words wouldn't stop. They kept coming, swirling around me, pushing their way into my mind. I had become its prisoner, and there was no escape, no way out. The blanket's fabric rippled slightly, as if it were breathing, waiting for me. I could feel its eyes on me, even though I couldn't see them. The darkness in the room seemed to press in tighter, suffocating me. "You opened the door," it reminded me, "and now you will never close it." I stumbled toward the door, my body moving instinctively, but before I could reach the handle, I felt it, the presence. It was right behind me. I turned around, my eyes wild, and there it was, the blanket, the creature inside. It was not just a thing. It was an extension of my own fears, my own guilt. It was me, and it had me. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. The room was closing in on me. The whispers, the presence, the blanket. It was all-consuming. I was trapped. Trapped in my own home. Trapped in my own fear. There was no escape. I turned to face the blanket one last time, knowing it would never let me go. Knowing that I had already lost. The darkness swirled around me, and I knew in that moment that it was over. The creature inside the blanket had taken me. I was no longer just its prisoner. I was part of it, and no matter how hard I tried, no matter where I ran, it would always be with me, forever. I woke up in the same place, yet everything felt different. The apartment looked the same, but the air was heavier, thicker, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something. I stood up slowly, my body aching, as if I hadn't moved in days, though it had only been hours since I last remembered. The blanket was still there, hanging by the window, just as it had been before. But now, it was more than just an object. It had become a living thing, a presence that filled the room with its oppressive energy. It didn't matter that the apartment seemed normal at first glance. The walls, the furniture, the mundane clutter that used to define my life. It was all overshadowed by the thing in the corner. The thing that had somehow become a part of me. "You're mine," it whispered, its voice echoing in my mind like a distant memory. "You can't escape." I closed my eyes, trying to block it out, but the words, the feeling, wouldn't leave. It wasn't just the blanket anymore. It was everything. It was inside me. I felt it in my bones, in my blood. The very air I breathed seemed tainted, contaminated by its presence. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself that this was just some twisted figment of my imagination, that I could go back to my life, back to normal. But every step I took, every breath I drew, brought me closer to the truth that I couldn't escape, the truth that the creature inside the blanket had taken root in my mind, in my soul, and there was no way to rid myself of it. I couldn't even leave the apartment. Every time I reached for the door, my hand froze, my body unwilling to move. It was like the blanket had already taken control, like it had wrapped its tendrils around me, pulling me back. I turned to face it once more, my heart pounding in my chest. The blanket wasn't moving, didn't need to. It was always there, in the corner of my vision, waiting, watching. The whispers had stopped, but I could still feel its presence, pressing down on me. It was like a weight, a force that wouldn't allow me to escape. "You can't hide," it whispered softly, though the words were laced with an almost affectionate malice. "You'll never be free." I sank to the floor, unable to keep my balance, my thoughts racing. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't outrun it. I was trapped, trapped in my own home, trapped in my own mind. I wanted to scream at the creature that had taken me, to scream at myself for ever opening that door. But I couldn't. I was powerless. I had become part of it. The blanket had absorbed me, my fears, my weaknesses. It had woven itself into my very soul, and there was no escaping it. It was my own creation, a reflection of everything I had tried to bury deep inside myself. And now it was here, sitting in the corner of my apartment, waiting for me to accept it. I couldn't fight it anymore. I couldn't deny it. I had let it in, and now it was part of me. The creature inside the blanket didn't need to speak anymore. It didn't need to whisper or beg. It had already won. It had consumed me, and I had let it. The room grew darker, the shadows deeper, as the blanket remained still. But I knew that it was watching me. I knew that it would never leave. I had opened the door, and now it was here to stay. It wasn't just the blanket. It wasn't just the creature inside it. It was the fear, the guilt, the memories that I had buried for so long. And now, they were all staring back at me, wrapped in the fabric of something I couldn't understand. The whispers began again, soft at first, but growing louder with each passing moment. "You will never be alone," the voice said. "You belong to me now." I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. I was trapped trapped in a nightmare of my own making, with no way out. The blanket had claimed me. and now it would never let me go. The darkness in the apartment felt deeper now, heavier, as though the very air had thickened into something oppressive. I hadn't moved from the floor since the blanket had claimed me, rooted in place by fear and the suffocating knowledge that I was not alone. The creature inside the blanket had begun to permeate every corner of my thoughts, infiltrating every part of my life, like a virus slowly taking over my mind. The whispers returned, this time louder, more insistent, like a chorus of voices chanting in unison. "You can't run from me," the voice said. "I'm inside you. You invited me in. You can't escape." I could hear the words echo in my skull, reverberating through my body, a cold reminder that I was now its prisoner. It wasn't just the blanket anymore. It wasn't just an object. It had become a part of me, a presence that lived inside my thoughts, inside my soul. The creature, the thing that had been crying and begging for release, wasn't just confined to the fabric anymore. It had spread, infecting everything it touched, consuming everything in its path. The apartment, once familiar, now felt like a prison. It was no longer my home. It was its lair. "You thought you could control me," it whispered, the voice seeping through my mind like poison. "You thought you could close the door, but it's too late. I'm already here." I tried to stand up, to force myself to move, but my body felt heavy, like something was holding me down. Every movement, every breath felt labored, as though I were wading through thick, suffocating air. The blanket remained in the corner, still as ever, but I knew it was watching me. I could feel its eyes on me, even though I couldn't see them. I knew it was waiting for me to acknowledge it, to accept it, but I couldn't. I refused to. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, as if the creature was desperate for me to give in, to break. "You can't fight me," it hissed. "You can't escape me. You are mine, forever." I closed my eyes, trying to block out the voice, trying to push it away, but it wouldn't stop. It was inside me, inside my head, crawling through my thoughts, feeding off my fear. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't even breathe without feeling its presence, pressing down on me, suffocating me. I needed to leave. I needed to escape. But every time I moved, every time I tried to get up, it was there, holding me in place. I was trapped by my own fears, trapped by my own choices. I had opened the door, and now I couldn't close it. The blanket, the creature, was always with me, and it would never let me go. I stumbled toward the door again, but the moment my hand touched the doorknob, the whispers intensified, like 1,000 voices screaming in my ears, forcing me to stay. "You can't leave," the voice snarled. "You belong to me." I pulled my hand away from the doorknob, stumbling back in fear. I couldn't fight it anymore. I couldn't fight the pull, the weight of its presence. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in on me, and I realized, with a sickening certainty, that I was no longer in control. I hadn't been in control for a long time. The blanket had taken over. The creature had taken over. And now I was just a passenger in my own life, trapped in a nightmare that I could never escape. I couldn't even tell what was real anymore. The apartment, the blanket, the whispers, they were all blending together into one indistinguishable mass of terror and confusion. "You'll never escape," the voice repeated, this time louder, almost triumphant. "You're mine now, forever." The darkness deepened, and I could feel the room spinning around me, my vision blurring, my mind disintegrating under the weight of it all. I wanted to scream, to break free, to wake up from this nightmare, but I knew it was pointless. There was no waking up. There was no escaping. The blanket had me, and it wasn't letting go. It was no use. The room had swallowed me whole, and the creature inside the blanket had taken everything I had. I was nothing but a shell now, trapped in a world of whispers and shadows. The presence was suffocating, its grip tightening with every passing second. I could feel it, feel its hunger, its need for something, anything to feed off. My every breath was a struggle. My every thought was tainted with its malice. I had tried to resist, tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The apartment, once a place of refuge, had become my cage. The blanket was no longer just an object. It was a living, breathing thing, feeding on my fear, my desperation. It had woven itself into my soul, become a part of me in ways I couldn't explain. The whispers had stopped for a moment, but I knew they weren't gone. They were always there, lingering just beneath the surface of my mind, ready to creep back in when I least expected it. "You can't leave," the voice said, not from the blanket this time, but from everywhere. "You're mine now. You always were." I closed my eyes, trying to shut it out, but it was impossible. The presence was too overwhelming, too powerful. The weight of it pressed down on me, crushing me under its force. I was drowning in it. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The room had become a void, a place where reality no longer existed. Everything was distorted, twisted, as if the very fabric of the world had unraveled and been replaced with this dark, suffocating presence. I opened my eyes again, staring at the corner where the blanket still lay. It was no longer just a blanket. It had become a symbol of my own helplessness, my own failure. It had claimed me, and now there was nothing left to fight with. It had won. "You will never escape me," the voice whispered again, this time directly in my ear, as though it were right behind me. "You opened the door. Now you can never close it. You are mine, forever." I tried to scream, but nothing came out. My mouth was dry, my throat constricted. I was paralyzed, unable to move, unable to even speak. The creature had taken control of everything, my body, my mind, my soul. I was nothing more than a prisoner, locked in this room with no way out. And then, something shifted. The blanket moved again, but this time, it wasn't just a writhing mass of fabric. It was something else, something more. It was like it was expanding, growing, becoming something that could no longer be contained by the corner of the room. The air grew colder, and I could see my breath fogging in front of me. The darkness seemed to deepen, swallowing everything in its path. The creature inside the blanket was coming for me. It had always been coming for me, waiting for me to give in. And now, it was time. I could feel it. Feel its cold, clammy fingers reaching for me, pulling me toward the shadows. There was no escape. There was no fighting it. The creature had already won. It had taken everything from me, and now it was taking my very soul. I closed my eyes one last time, but I knew it was futile. There was no escaping this. There was no waking up from this nightmare. The creature inside the blanket had consumed me, and now I was part of it, forever. The darkness closed in, and I was gone.